Good morning, I'm Taylor Wilson, and today is Friday, March 28th, 2025. This is the Excerpt. Today, Trump's withdrawal of Elise Stefanik's nomination as UN ambassador and what the move tells us about Republicans' concerns in the House. Plus, authorities arrest an alleged MS-13 gang leader, and let's talk about Greenland. President Donald Trump said yesterday that he is withdrawing the nomination of Congresswoman Elise Stefanik to be the ambassador to the United Nations. The move comes amid growing concerns from Republicans about holding on to their narrow majority in the House. I spoke with USA Today Congress reporter Riley Beggin for more. Thanks for hopping on, Riley.
Anytime.
So, Riley, what did President Donald Trump decide here about Congresswoman Elise Stefanik as it pertains to the UN?
He had nominated Elise Stefanik to be the ambassador to the United Nations, and he announced that he is not going to have her be the ambassador to the United Nations anymore. He's withdrawing her nomination, and he has not announced who he's going to replace her with, but Stefanik will be going back to the House.
This comes amid concerns from Republicans about holding on to their House majority. Can you talk through some of that and what they're really focused on at this point?
I was thinking about this as I was writing the story. Have you ever heard about people saying, you want to be good at your job, but not too good? That's kind of what happened here. Elise Stefanik represents a solidly Republican district in New York. She's been in the House for many years now. She has played a crucial role in this very tight margins House where Republicans run the House, but they only do by a few votes. So they really need her, and they need her to keep her seat. So there are a few members of the House who have already been brought over into the administration. And there are some concerns from Republicans that at least one of those districts, that's Michael Waltz's district in Florida, that the Republican who is running to replace him may be endangered. So amid those concerns, they're looking at Stefanik's seat and saying, wow, we really cannot afford for this seat to flip to Democrats.
Okay, and how is this decision from Trump on Stefanik really landing on either side of the aisle, Riley?
Republicans in the House are obviously welcoming Stefanik back with open arms. They, like I said, really do need her here. Democrats are using the opportunity to lambast Republicans and suggest that they really are going to be hurting in these midterm elections coming up, saying that Trump's policies are unpopular, and that's why they're facing some challenges at the ballot box in these special elections. So definitely something you would expect to see from both sides here.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about those special elections. I mean, what's next with these upcoming elections, and how might they really impact the map directly on Capitol Hill?
Republicans control the House right now, 218 to 213. When they are at full staff here, originally there were two Republicans that were pulled into the administration. So if those are replaced by Republicans, that would be 220. And then Democrats actually lost two members over the last few weeks that passed away. So if they are replaced by Democrats, then the full sort of party breakdown would be 220 to 215. That is one of the tightest House margins in American history. What that means is that depending on who is there on a given day, Republicans who do control the House can really only lose by one or two votes here. So who replaces the people that left makes a big difference here. It's former Congressman Matt Gaetz, who was pulled to be Attorney General. He dropped out over allegations of sexual assault. And then former Congressman Michael Waltz, who is a national security advisor for the president. Both of them Republicans from Florida. And when they were pulled into the administration, the assumption was these guys are going to be easy to replace with other Republicans. And the latest data is that may not be the case. The person who is running to replace Michael Waltz, Randy Fine, is being really outraised by his Democratic opponent. Republican leadership had to pour a bunch of money into his race recently and are really trying to rally the troops. So I think they're a little bit spooked.
All right, Riley Beggin covers Congress for USA Today. Another great breakdown for us, Riley. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Federal agencies that influence or fund how Americans get health care face widespread changes under plans by Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to eliminate 10,000 jobs from the Department of Health and Human Services. Combined with earlier buyouts and voluntary departures, the overhaul will eliminate about 1 in 4 federal health agency jobs and save $1.8 billion each year, HHS said. These agencies oversee how the nation pays for health care for older Americans and the poor. They also research infectious diseases and public health threats. The overhaul will also bring changes to the agency that scrutinizes the safety of prescription drugs, food, and medical devices. For a closer look at the impact of the cuts, check out a link in today's show notes. Federal authorities have arrested a 24-year-old alleged leader of the MS-13 gang on a gun charge in Virginia yesterday. Despite the single charge, U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi identified Henry Josue Villatoro Santos as one of the three main leaders of MS-13 in the U.S. responsible for the East Coast. MS-13 is a transnational gang founded in Los Angeles in the 1980s by Salvadoran immigrants. After gang members were deported from the U.S., the gang flourished in Central America, growing rapidly in and around El Salvador and Mexico. President Trump's State Department named MS-13 a designated terrorist organization last month. Usha Vance, wife of Vice President J.D. Vance, had been set to visit Greenland to see cultural sites, including a major dog sled race this week. But plans have changed. I caught up with USA Today World Affairs correspondent Kim Helmgaard to learn more and for some broader context about the conversation around Greenland. Hello, Kim. Thanks for hopping on.
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me.
Tell us about this trip to Greenland that the Vance family is taking, and how and why has their itinerary changed?
It was meant to be a trip that was going to take place Thursday to Saturday. Now it's just a single day to a U.S. military base in the north of Greenland. Originally, the second lady, vice president's wife, Usha Vance, was going to spend a couple of days in Greenland with her son. They were going to look at some sort of historic sites, do some cultural activities, including have a look at what is, by all accounts, one of the biggest dog sledding races in the world. None of that is happening now, and it's just the trip to the military base because the Greenlandic officials, Danish officials kind of said, well, you haven't been invited. There's no official invitation from the government. The White House pushed back on that and said, well, we do have an invitation. In fact, it sort of lies somewhere in between. There was a private company, an American guy who sort of is promoting or helping to promote business ties between Greenland and the United States. He invited the U.S. delegation to this dog race because he's a sponsor of it. There's just been a little bit of a sort of a tension between the two sides, and for that reason, the trip has been kind of curtailed.
President Donald Trump has seemed obsessed, really, Kim, with Greenland. How did Trump's interest in Greenland come to be?
He has been talking about Greenland since 2019 in his first term. At that point, he didn't talk about it all the time in the way he has done for the first few months of his second term. But he's interested in Greenland for two reasons. They're both related to national security. The first one is there's also a military aspect or component to it, and that is to do with bolstering or beefing up the base in northern Greenland and to retrofit it or evolve it to be part of U.S. Space Force that can shoot down long-range ballistic missiles. He wants to essentially build a kind of Iron Dome-like anti-missile system like the Israelis have. He believes, or folks around him believe, that they need to have a more formalized relationship with Greenland to make that happen. Denmark, which actually owns Greenland, says that's just not true. In fact, in terms of the letter of the law, the Danes are accurate about that. There's been an agreement for about half a century between the US and Denmark, giving the Americans kind of pretty much full license to move around Greenland and to build additional military bases, provided that they just inform Greenlandic and Danish officials about it. A number of years ago, there were a lot more military bases in Greenland, but the Americans decided to close them. There's another huge aspect here to do with it's kind of an economic one, but also has a national security lens on it. And that is to do with rare earth minerals and resources. These are the resources like aluminum, zinc, cobalt, all the things that go into electric batteries, TVs, consumer electronics, and also defense systems. And right now, China is the biggest supplier, including for the US. Greenland, as far as the geologists understand and the scientists understand, is sitting on kind of vast caches of untapped rare earth resources. And so the White House wants more access to that, feels that it needs to acquire or annex Greenland in some form to achieve that. There's another irony to do with this is that, again, the Danish officials and Greenlandic officials are saying there's nothing preventing American companies from going into Greenland and getting licenses to do that. In fact, there's some there already.
You touched on this a little bit, Kim, but can you help us understand how, I guess, broad U.S. politics and especially this current administration are being viewed right now in either Greenland or in Denmark? And really, is there any push, Kim, from folks there to be part of the U.S. or support any of the kind of Trump efforts in all of this?
There's very crystal clear polling in Greenland that the people there feel overwhelmingly that they do not want to become part of the United States. There's no question. What they do want, as we understand from polling, is they want to become independent of Denmark. But the two things are not the same. Just because they want independence from Denmark does not mean they want to join the US. Many Greenlandic people do want increased economic cooperation with the United States. It appears they want more companies to come in, not just for the rare earths, but for like the fisheries industry there and tourism. In Denmark itself, it kind of depends who we're talking about. We're talking about government and officials. They're exasperated about it. They don't quite understand why like a close ally would even use the language that Trump has used about this. They feel that the issues that he has, and the military one, the economic one, are both achievable under existing relationships and agreements. And I think the Danish language on this is getting increasingly angered by it. But of course, how do you push back on the wealthiest, most powerful country on earth? The Danish state had all these horrible programs like, kind of mass sterilization programs and other programs that grew out of colonial thinking and context. And so even now, many Greenlanders dislike the Danish state for that reason. On the other hand, Denmark is a kind of center-left, wealthy, social democratic Scandinavian country that has a big state and pours a lot of money into things like education and health. And the Greenlanders get a huge grant from the Danish government that gives them what would be, by all accounts, considered to be a good standard of living. And so the square that is difficult to circle is that Greenlanders want independence. They don't want to give up their welfare state. They don't want to become part of the U.S. They want increased, U.S. business cooperation, but that doesn't mean that they want to be a U.S. state or anything like that.
All right, excellent context on all this. Kim Helmgaard covers world affairs for USA Today. Thank you, Kim.
Thanks so much for having me.
There's a new Guinness Book of World Record holder. Mr. Pugsley Adams, a silver Maine Coon from Minnesota, has the longest tail for a domestic cat at 18.5 inches. That's 1.5 foot. We have a link to a video of Pugsley in our show notes. And thanks for listening to The Excerpt. We're produced by Shannon Ray Green and Kelly Monahan, and our executive producer is Laura Beatty. You can get the podcast wherever you get your audio, and if you're on a smart speaker, just ask for The Excerpt. I'm Taylor Wilson, and I'll be back tomorrow with more of The Excerpt from USA Today.